Right, thanks for joining us once again, where we're looking at a video by a channel called The Proof, which is a vegan supporting channel run by a vegan called Simon Hill, who does anything but provide any proof of anything. What he does is he provides us often with his opinion. In this video, though, he's inviting Gil Carvalho to give his opinion. So let's hear the opinion and put it right where it's wrong, shall we? Okay.
So you're talking about blood lipids there. And I think people that have tuned into this show, and certainly people that have tuned into your show, will be well aware of this discussion around how saturated fat affects cholesterol and specifically ApoB.
Yes, but so?
And how that can sort of modulate cardiovascular disease risk.
Well, there's where you fall down, Simon, because there is no extant evidence in the literature anywhere of a cause and effect nature which can underpin your statement there of risk, because risk is a cause and effect statement. You're saying, on the basis of this number here, I can predict your risk going forward. No, you can't, Simon. False. That's an ideology. It's a theology. It's a great story. It needs more emphasis on the dragons.
And increase the risk of atherosclerosis, this plaque build-up in our arteries.
Yeah, there are no evidences still on risk anywhere in the literature. It's a word that's ubiquitously used in the epidemiological field of nutrition, but it's not appropriate because it's associative work that cannot inform on risk.
So is that the prime?
It's associative work that can't even inform on association, in fact, at large, because almost every outcome of these studies is adjusted, for which you can read fabricated. Scientists control things before they collect data, then they collect their data, then they report what they saw. Pseudoscientists, anti-scientists, nutrition epidemiologists, instead of controlling anything, collect a bunch of data and then adjust it somehow. Most people don't know what that somehow is, how this is adjusted. And anyway, if you want to report on science, it's an observational-based thing. You report what you saw, and these people don't do that. If you want to learn about adjustment to data sets, stick around my channel because I've got some videos on that as well. In the meantime, let's hear more about this idea that these two boys have that somehow cholesterol or lipoproteins in some way are involved causally in the development of heart disease, which is false.
Primary mechanism by which saturated fat is affecting cardiovascular disease? Is it the only?
It isn't, though, Simon.
Mechanism? Are there other mechanisms that you're aware of?
It's the one that has the most data behind it.
So none. Every other idea has exactly the same amount of data behind it, Gil. None.
So to give people a bit more detail, so I guess we could give people the...
Good, yes. So Gil Carvalho, MD, a qualification, my belief is that he has never used, not one day. He's never actually practiced medicine, so putting the qualification up there, a bit pointless. It doesn't qualify him to speak on cholesterol anyway, because allopathic medics are not qualified to speak on this topic. Perhaps his PhD, though, is in some field of medical science. Well, yes, but not cholesterol or cardiovascular pathophysiology, unfortunately. His PhD is in neuroscience, which is a quite different field of health science, isn't it? Right, so that's Gil in a nutshell, anyway.
The 20-second primer, well, just in case people aren't familiar with ApoB or
Yes, ApoB is a apolipoprotein. It's one of the protein tags on the various classes of lipoprotein carriers.
Well, heard about it. These fats, cholesterol, triglycerides, they are carried around in our blood. Fat and water don't mix. So the way our body solves that is by carrying fat inside these cargo ships, if you will, called lipoproteins. And lipoproteins have essentially two large families. One of those is atherogenic, raises...
No, Gil, there is no evidence extant anywhere in the literature that can support that ridiculous claim. It's a cause and effect statement, Gil. You cannot support it. Sorry, what's next?
Risk of cardiovascular...
No, not risk. No. Risk is a completely inappropriate word in this field. Risk is a cause and effect statement. It requires experimental data. Do you have any, Gil? If so, let us know about it, because none of the rest of the scientific fraternity are aware of this hitherto. You'd be up for a Nobel Prize in the case of having such data to hand. You might also be up for prison because it would be pretty unethical to get such data.
Disease, if those lipoproteins are very concentrated in the blood, in the plasma. And conveniently, that family carries a tag protein called apolipoprotein B, or ApoB for short. So we can measure ApoB and get a count.
So what?
Of the number of those lipoproteins that are problematic.
They're not problematic, Gil. There is no evidence extant anywhere that they are. That is your opinion. And it's ideologically based, theologically based, because of your clear and inherent support for vagunarized fuddery.
Well, that's ApoB. In terms of the mechanism of saturated fat, the most well accepted, the most documented mechanism has to do with the LDL receptor, which is essentially a docking station that exists in many places throughout our body, but the relevant location here would be the liver. And so these little antennae, these little docking stations are on the surface of the hepatocytes, the liver cells, and they bind to these lipoproteins, particularly the ApoB carrying family, and they internalize them, removing them from circulation and lowering the concentration of ApoB carrying lipoproteins in the blood, which lowers risk.
No, it doesn't. Still, there is still no evidence extant anywhere in the literature that can inform us on risk of anything with regards hard health outcomes in human beings over any period of time as that relates to any aspect of these issues that you're talking about here, Gil. Not one single data point anywhere.
When we up our intake of saturated fat, it removes some of those receptors on the surface of the liver, and the consequence is that less lipoproteins are removed from circulation. Their half-life goes up, their residence time goes up, their concentration goes up, and risk goes up.
No, that last bit is the bit you added yourself, Gil, based on your theology. It's your opinion. There is no data extant anywhere to support that claim. False.
Well, that's the most well-established mechanism. There are some.
There are no mechanisms of risk established. Sorry.
Others that are hypothesized, things around some inflammatory markers, coagulation factors, other proteins that are on the surface of lipoproteins that also determine their residence time and their binding affinity to different.
Yes, you're getting into the weeds now, Gil. You've skipped over the fact that what you've just done is made a series of cause and effect statements without providing any evidence that there is a cause and effect relationship. And the reason you haven't supplied that evidence, Gil, is because it does not exist. It is a theory, and it's wrong.
Different receptors. So there's research on that, but there's less certainty, I would say, than the LDL receptor mechanism.
And you made a point earlier that some saturated fat in the diet is fine. It's always going to be there. And the mission here is not to get it to zero. So if we come back to that 8 to...
Why would you want to get it anywhere near zero? For the last at least 4.5 million years, Simon, we have got the vast majority of our energy provision, for want of a better term, through largely saturated animal fats.
10% threshold, and thinking about that.
Threshold, that's just someone's opinion. It's just an idea. There's no science to underpin doing that. It's a bad idea.
Process you just described there with the dock. So is it that once you sort of go up above that 8 to 10% of energy, that you get a degree of this downregulation of that LDL receptor or that dock to the point where there is this increased sort of residence time or backlog of these ApoB containing lipids?
Geez, the echo's good in here, isn't it, Simon? Gil just said that, and it still has no impact on anyone's risk of heart disease whatsoever.
For proteins that is now sufficient in the plasma to cause plaque buildup.
No. See, that's the bit you made up, Simon. That's the bit for which there is no recognized mechanism. Neither is there any empirical experimental data to prove a cause and effect relationship in any way. That's your opinion. And it's as ignorant as it's possible to get, actually, frankly.
You know, I don't know if this is known.
Simon is also a vagoon, by the way.
That mechanistic detail. I've asked this exact question a number of times, and I have never heard a compelling answer.
Because there isn't one, Gil. Good.
And actually, for my conversation with Kevin Mackey, that's one of the top questions I had on my end. And I already sent him the questions, and that was featured on there. Because when you look at the effect of saturated fat intake on blood lipids, it's fairly linear. It's
Sure, as it should be. That makes perfect sense.
near linear. The LDL cholesterol and ApoB go up in a fairly straight line. And also, if you look at the effect of ApoB concentration on risk, it's
No, see, there's the thing you're going to make up now, because there are no data points or studies anywhere in the literature that can inform us in any way on risk, Gil. Still.
also pretty much a straight line. The
Other straight lines involve the size of a child's foot from the base of the calcaneus to the tip of the largest of the phalanges, and their ability to solve complex mathematical abilities in the population of individuals aged between 5 and 10. Does that mean the cause of mathematical abilities is big feet? This is ridiculous, Gil. What's next?
the exact mechanistic reason for that sigmoidal curve, I've wondered this many times myself. I've asked this question, and I've never heard a convincing explanation.
Because it still doesn't exist.
I don't know if this is understood, but
No, that's the whole point, Gil. That's why you are espousing a theology, an idea. It's pretty clear to anyone with more than 3 brain cells that the lipid hypothesis does not withstand even the most basic cursory refutation, and as such should be rejected. What exactly keeps the Wagnerite parade from making that fundamental leap of common sense and logic? I don't know. I will never understand. Why would you hang on to an idea that enjoys no empirical support and doesn't actually work in the real world? Don't know.
but my hope is that Kevin Mackey, being one of the top dogs on lipids, is going to be able to answer it. So stay tuned.
So, some opinions, a bit of chit-chat. No proof of anything there, Simon, as usual. Just opinions. All right. Perhaps if you want to have a debate with me, Simon, about some actual science at some point, you might want to get in touch. I suspect you won't do that, though. If I were you, Simon, with your level of credibility and knowledge and experience in this field, I would stay the hell away from me. Nonetheless, the invite stands. Do email me. Let's get together and talk about this cholesterol, cardiovascular disease relationship, shall we? And we'll see who makes the better argument. It'll be me. Right, the rest of you, see you then. Or indeed, if Simon does run away with excrement in his trousers, as I suspect he will and should, then we'll be doing a video about someone else who's wrong in some way on the interwebs, because it doesn't look like slowing down, does it? See you then, boys and girls.